shall break down segregation and admit the Negro race into our theaters, into our swimming pools, into our homes, and into our...
Strom Thurmond is remembered today as one of the great American hypocrites. He was the firebrand segregationist who had a black daughter. This was the revelation that came out after his death. We also know Thurmond as the Dixiecrat candidate in '48, the author of the Southern Manifesto in '56, and the record holder, even to this day, of the longest filibuster, 24 hours and 18 minutes, that he spoke against the 1957 Civil Rights Act. We know Thurmond is one of the last of the Jim Crow demagogues.
I came to the United States Senate, a 29-year-old fella, out of the civil rights movement, a public defender, and turns out one of my closest friends ends up being Strom Thurmond, a man whose background and interest at that time when I came were considerably different than mine. If you had told me when I entered the United States Senate that one of the people that I would have the closest relationship with in the Senate would be Strom Thurmond, I would have told you you were crazy. Because as Strom told me, he said, Joe, if there has to be a Democrat as president, and I hope it won't happen, he said, it might as well be you. And after I dropped out of the race, he came and said, don't worry about it. He said, you got a good 30 years left to try.
Today, I'm laying out a fourth part of my Build Back Better plan, advancing racial equity across the American economy, not just part of the other pillar of Build Back Better, but this is in its own right. To start, we create a new small business opportunity fund. It dramatically expands on the successful Obama-Biden initiative that generated more than $5 billion and $5 in private equity for every $1 in public investment in a small business, particularly in hard-pressed areas. It will also allow us to support community development banks that have a proven record of investing in minority small businesses. That $30 billion is estimated to leverage $150 billion in new financing and equity for more Black and brown small businesses. So our Small Business Opportunity Fund supports an investment in a small manufacturer of color seeking to commercialize a new technology, for example. That helps the manufacturer get started. Then private investors, we know, notice the promise of that business and invest their private dollars as well. That helps manufacturers scale and grow. That's how we'll make sure that those with the best ideas are not denied the venture capital or financing they need because of race or zip code.
All right, so what Biden is talking about is this program called the State Small Business Credit Initiative, SSBCI. This is not a black program. This is a small business program. It's not even a minority program. So let's look into this. They have a report on treasury.gov for this program. It's an evaluation of how it actually performed. Now, the section that we are most concerned about, 2B, this is where I learned about underserved communities. So the title is Supporting Small Businesses in Underserved Communities. The act requires that states include plans for targeting underserved communities in their proposed program designs. Recognizing that economic conditions varied across states, SSBCI gave states flexibility to define underserved communities. For example, some programs targeted minority or women-owned businesses, others economically distressed communities, still others rural businesses. Given the variety of approaches, Treasury tracked activities using a proxy for underserved communities. The location of a business in census tracts defined as low and moderate income. Through 2015, 42% of the 16,919 transactions were loans to businesses located in LMI communities. All right, so basically, undeserved communities could mean any fucking thing. It doesn't mean black. And if we're going to be real about it, that means they have no clue if any black person actually benefited from this program. And in the best case scenario, even if all of these low and moderate income communities, if all of those transactions were with black people, only 42% of those transactions actually went to black people. And if this is the idea to close the racial wealth gap, where the majority of these transactions are going to go to white males, what the fuck is the point of this? And if we go to this section for observations from credit support programs, the lessons learned from implementation, reaching undeserved communities required focused marketing through a network of lenders connected to targeted communities, which means they were having a hard time with even informing people that this program existed.
Expanding black and brown home ownership is another. Today, American cities, there are a number where about 75% of white Americans own their homes. Only 25% of black and brown citizens, or black citizens, own their homes. Even in the middle class communities of color, the same homes that exist in the white community are often valued significantly less. Those black residents then see their wealth accumulate much more slowly. Many of you are from families like mine, middle-class families. Where did my parents accumulate any ability to borrow and generate any wealth? In their home. That's how it got built. That's how a lot of us are able to send our kids to school, to borrow against that. When a house is an asset that helps build equity and wealth, the home ownership disparity denies equal opportunity.
If you go to his housing policy, a lot of it is vague and generic. It starts off with the whole African American thing, and then it goes into an everybody thing, people of color thing, all type of bullshit, tax credit, nothing that is going to be significant to make up for the very things that Biden was describing. So honestly, it is all piecemeal stuff that does not go far enough. They do have some policy about reversing racial discrimination on the local level. I don't see much of the results from the Obama era when this was first implemented, but Trump ended it, and Biden is talking about restarting it as part of his solution. I don't understand the logic behind creating a federal program to deal with racial discrimination that has largely been on the state level. And within that federal program, you're giving the power to the states to reverse their own racial discrimination.
The Southern revolt against President Truman reaches its climax at Birmingham under the states' rights banner. Venerable Alfalfa Bill Murray comes out of retirement to join in the protest against the president's civil rights program. More than 6,000 flocked to the Rump Convention to select the presidential ticket. In the forefront of the move are Alabama and Mississippi delegates who bolted the Democratic National Convention at Philadelphia. 13 southern states are represented in the uproarious session which precedes the nomination of Governors Thurmond of South Carolina and Fielding Wright of Mississippi as party standard bearers. Governor Thurmond attacks the civil rights plank.
It simply means that it's another effort on the part of the president to dominate the country by force and to put into effect these uncalled for and these damnable proposals he has recommended under the guise of so-called civil rights. And I tell you, the American people from one side or the other had better wake up and oppose such a program, and if they don't, the next thing will be a totalitarian state in these United States.
I'm sick and tired of the federal government trying to dictate to the states and threaten to withhold funds if the states don't do what the federal government wants. So let us take a stand here today to show that the states have their rights and will not be invaded by the federal government.
Because as Strom told me, he said, Joe, if there has to be a Democrat as president, and I hope it won't happen, he said, it might as well be you. And after I dropped out of the race, he came to me and said, don't worry about it. He said, you got a good 30 years left to try.